Loving God, you are the eternal present. You are right here, exactly right now. We are in the center of you, like a fountain that keeps water gushing outward. That is time, constantly gushing forward. But when you're right in the center, we're at the place where it starts to move outward. That's where we are right now with you, is in the present moment with each other, with a sense of unity and love, connected with you, who is unity and love. We thank you for this gathering and for these weeks that we've been spending time and delving deeper into this great mystery of unity and love, universal Christ. And please be with us during this last talk. Amen. All right. Well, oftentimes when I do this kind of thing at the very end is we do what I like to call a question and response. It's not question and answer because I don't have the answers, neither does anybody else. But I can provide my best response based on where I'm at and where you guys are, where we're all at, because everybody's in a different places, that's part of that beautiful diversity. And if something comes up and we want to spend a little bit more time on it, then it can just open us up right into a dialogue. So this is going to be much more free-flowing. I have no screens to share or slides to share because we're going to be actually just talking about what's on your hearts. So based on the past few weeks that we've connected and delved into, has anything emerged from you that has intrigued you or challenged you or helped you to grow, or things that you'd like to explore more?
I do have one thing that I have in my notes that I really, really like.
Okay.
And it's in this illustration where I think it's liminal. Is that the word? Or liminal space, where you were mentioning how I feel like that resonated with me. It's kind of like you cannot grab onto something new until you let go of the old you, which is so true in life. Like sometimes we're just holding on to something so strong because we feel like it's the safe place. But then you were just saying how when you go through that space and then you enter a new room, then you just realize the other one was way too small for you. But you have to go through the actual process of letting go. And I feel that happens to me a lot. I'm just grasping to the things that I believe I know, my experience, whatever, and just holding on to it, my knowledge, my way, my plans. And then it's just I will not be able to grab new things until I don't let go of it. So it's just I really like that. Even the illustration is just because you were also saying once you're in the new room, it's just a constant change. It's not you will stay the new room forever. Eventually you will realize it's also too small. So you will keep changing and changing. So that's something I really, really like. And the question for me was what's kind of a practice that I can have to constantly be doing that, letting go and just dying to self and just realizing, okay, yeah, that's enough. No holding to that.
Oh my gosh, what a gorgeous question. And it really speaks to the depth of your own spirituality, but also that you're taking what we're talking about and resonating at a very deep level. So thank you for the courage to even ask that question. And
because that's transformation, right? Understanding the old room and the new room is really transformation every day, right?
So I'm going to say a couple of things to reflect on what your question was, and then I'll open it up and ask anybody to share, because I think all of us would probably have some neat things. What I would say is, first, life itself will teach you everything you need to know about how to stay in, how to be in liminal space. Because if we're listening to life, and what I mean by that is every single day, really, the more you get into this, it's really every moment is all packaged up. Like what God does, I mean, let's just put it to you this way. Let's say everything that you would ever need to know about life, about love, God, everything is given to you every second. God gives you this, like constant, okay? It's not that is not coming to us. Those lessons are not coming to us. They are every second. But we are only ready for what we're ready for. And that's the transformation. It's not that it's really what we're being transformed into is greater and greater vision of what has always been there. See? And so that's why you can have people, let's say, who they don't need a lot of material things, or they're not attached to anything, and they're just full of love, and they really do believe that every moment is a moment of joy and peace. Even during the hard times, they can find beautiful depth and reasoning, purpose, joy, even in the really hard times. That's because they have learned to open up their eyes big enough to be able to enjoy this consciousness of being in God all the time. But oftentimes what we have to do is life, like, let's just pretend that God is giving you this, everything you ever need 100% of the time is giving it to you every second, but you only get a little bit of it. So what God does is then I'm making this up, it stands behind you with a big net and gathers all the lessons you didn't get, and then repackages them and then throws it in front of you. So then you come and then you hit it again and you get a little bit more, and then God's like, okay, and then tosses it in front of you, boom, until it happens where you and God are walking hand in hand and just like, okay, God, you're giving me this right now, and right now, and right now. So that's what I mean by life is going to present it to you. Like today, right now, you are going to get lots of lessons. If your eyes are open to it, you're going to get lots of lessons that will speak to old room and liminal space and what you would like to the new room to be. Like, you're using your imagination, what would that look like? Like, all of that is going to be available today if you're open to it. Number 2 is sometimes we have to have training on this kind of seeing. And the best kind of training I've ever experienced is a thing called centering prayer. Centering prayer. And it was reformulated. It was an ancient type of prayer. Some people say that even Jesus actually did it himself. But then it was reformulated by a monk named Thomas Keating, who was a very good friend of Richard Rohr. Mm-hmm. And Thomas Keating, and then other monks after him, created this thing. It's a very easy way to get into the present moment called centering prayer. I will send you a link to the apps, because there's apps that you can download on either Android or iPhone, just called Centering Prayer, I think it's what it's called. But it's basically 4 steps, and that's it. Okay. And it's going to sound super easy, but 99% of the people that I've ever explained this to never do it, because it's the boredom of it doesn't stimulate our brain, and so we drop it. But what centering prayer is first you have what's called a sacred word. A sacred word. And a sacred word can be anything that you have that brings you back. It's like an anchor that brings you back to the present moment. But it can't be something so meaningful that you end up focusing upon the word. So it's a tricky little thing. And that's why it's important for you to find a word that would be helpful for that. And what you got to do is you have to, like my word that I use, and it can change over time, but that it's usually you usually are supposed to do it one word for a long time until you feel a need to change it, and you may never. But that is choose. My word has been space, not like outer space, but space, like space between thoughts. And when I say space, like to myself, it brings me right back into the present moment, which is really awesome.
Yeah.
The second thing you have to do is you time yourself. And you time yourself for, they say a minimum of 20 minutes at first. Because our brains, like 20 minutes is kind of a magic number, brain-wise. And if you do 20 minutes, then it can be long enough to start letting your mind grow, like firing.
It's like exercise.
Yeah, you don't hear have exercise. We'll just go do that for 10 minutes. It's usually 20 minutes or up, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Good. So same thing with our brains, and that's because it's about the cells and the neurons and all of that. So then what we want to do is sit comfortably with your eyes closed, and I'll send you these guidelines so you don't have to just concentrate on it too much, but it's sit comfortably with your eyes closed, and you gently introduce the sacred word. And this is beautiful. It's a symbol of your consent to God's presence and action within. It's a symbol, whatever word you choose is a symbol of your consent to God's presence and action within. God's presence everywhere and inside you, and action everywhere and inside you. It's a consent form, if you will. Now, when you are engaged with a thought, so this is step 3, when you're engaged with a thought, you just return gently back to your sacred word. Just return gently back to your sacred word. And here's the thing, it'll happen every second. Because you and I just think constantly. And the brain, that's the way the brain is. It's just a constant thinking. And it's going to feel like these thoughts will come, and it'll be like hooks grabbing, like you're a fish, and it's just grabbing you for your attention. And pretty soon you're starting to think about, what you're going to have a conversation today, or start fantasizing about a conversation you should have had, or
Right. Ugh.
And then you've lost it, the present moment.
Yeah.
So the point of this whole exercise, now this is probably the most important thing about this exercise, okay? The point of actually the exercise itself is not to do meditation well, to actually create that space, because you're not going to be able to. I'm going to tell you, you're going to lose. You're going to be amazed at how well you can't even keep space between thoughts. But that's not the point. The point is actually to learn how to detach and return. Detach from the thought and return. So you're building a muscle. It is like boot camp. You're building a muscle of detachment and returning to the center. And then what happens is you do this over and over again every day, and your neurons start activating a little bit differently. And you'll find that you're able to detach and return during the course of your day. When normally you would be just like hooked line and sinker around a thought or a hurt or a pain or a joy or whatever it is, that's something in the future and the past, you're no longer, if you can catch yourself more quickly, and then you're really able to return into the present moment of the eternal now. Okay.
Yeah.
And the reason why I want to offer this practice to you is because this is liminal space living. Centering prayer is an exercise of liminal space because it feels like nothing. You're not dialoguing with God. You're not asking God for this thing or that thing. You're not praying for anybody. You're not. We're not even saying you should imagine or use visionary things or repeat any sayings for the sayings themselves. The only reason why you're repeating the sacred word is to bring you back into nothing. And you're gonna emerge feeling nothing happened. Like that was so boring and it took way too long and oh my God. But here's the thing, after a while, it's gonna be like getting into a pool where you're just relaxed. It's gonna feel so wonderful. Just this moments of silence and returning and letting go and returning. And that is the liminal space. And so that's why it is recommended. And when you do that, then you're also able to simultaneously enjoy the present moment more, like we talked about right before that. So, centering prayer. Anybody have any thoughts?
You know, my pastor, he is really a successful man outside of practicing this pastor. He writes books and stuff, but he said one of the most powerful things he's ever done for really the last 15 years is he spends 60 minutes every single day with his eyes closed, with no phone, no emails. He'll have a pen and paper just in case. And I'm like, for 60 minutes. He said it used to be 90 and he had to cut it down because he got so busy, but it's pretty powerful. So, I don't know. I believe what you're saying.
And the difference between what I'm saying and what the pen and paper stuff is even when you get these kinds of illuminations, like, oh my God, you gotta let that go too.
You gotta let it go, right?
That's right. Because it's really about being in presence. We have to learn how to be present. But I love the fact that he did that. I used to wake up at 4:30 in the morning so I could do an hour of it.
Yeah.
Wow.
You know what? When I think about doing something like that, and if I try, is more when I realize that you get into this quiet time is when you hear this little voice that you think is your brain, but you get the voice, like I call it God's voice, because as Mariana said, is the aha, right? And in that moment, it's like you're so busy, but if you go to that space, everything is there. All the answers are there, and then it's weird, but it's hard. It is hard.
That's right. Yeah. And the answers, even deeper than any answer you get to a certain problem, the answer is going to be silence. I mean, think of it this way. You guys, if you like to listen to music, the only reason why you and I can enjoy music is because they are individual notes that are held up and spaced out by silence. Think about that. For example, even the fact that you and I are understanding each other right now is because my syllables, my words there's silence, even its smallest little pits of silence that create syllables, and that's how you can understand me. But if I were to talk to you without any silence, it would sound like this. Because there's absolutely zero silence. So silence, like what you and I would think of as music or any manifestation, music, sound, things that we see, things that we experience, we only see and experience and smell and hear these things because of the silence that's behind it, holding it up.
That makes sense.
Yeah. So centering prayer gets you into that.
It's so interesting because sometimes, at least in my case, I sometimes associate silence with distance, like not a positive tone at the end. So it's interesting, and this whole curse, it's being flipping all these preconceived ideas that I have, like one silence. It's not it doesn't need to be something bad. In fact, it's something good and needed a lot of times.
I love silence.
Instead of usually when I think if to get better, it's like even I can visualize myself like going up, going above, like, but here in this course, it's like go deep, dig deeper, like, so it's the opposite. So for me, it's being like eye-opening everything, and it's very interesting. I always relate everything that I learned to my parenthood part, that in my daughter, it's in a Montessori school, and the philosophy behind everything is to teach children to focus for longer periods of time, and they need to be silent, and they need to be working, and they need to focus, even if it's 30 seconds. Next tomorrow it's going to be 31, and so they will increase. So it's just interesting how these great philosophies at the end, they still have a lot of things in common. So for me, it's been eye-opening, the whole experience.
That's wonderful. Thank you for sharing that. That's beautiful. That's the point.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. As Richard Rohr says, if it's true, if whatever we say is true, then it's got to be true everywhere. It can't just be true in this thing here, but not true there. And when something is true, capital T, you're going to see it in 100 different directions, places you didn't even expect it to. You're going to be like, that's the same teaching.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And for me, it has been an eye-opening thinking that God is inside. Really, I really knew it, but instead of outside. So we need to be aware more that it's not a guy outside, it's not something outside. When we see the creation, it's right there, but at the same time, you are part of the creation, and this unity is like we're not separated. We're not separated of anything. So it's kind of this like energy that is like just a block like this, and all of us were part of this.
Yeah, in fact, I don't know if I've shown you. Did I show you guys this before?
Oh, that was my favorite when I was little. I had like 10 of them, and I had the giant one too. That was bigger than your whole body.
Oh my gosh.
My favorite toy ever.
This right here is my favorite toy. It's my for me, this is my theology. Like this right here is actually a theological symbol. Let me show you why. Because it's based on what we've been talking about. Okay, so let's pretend that the top of this is called a Hoberman sphere. A Hober, H-O-B-E-R, Hoberman, H-O-B-E-R-M-A-N sphere. So let's pretend like this right here is one of you. This is me. This is your partners, your kids, whatever. And each one of these little spokes that come out are like different people. And it's true, my experience is not the same as your experience and vice versa. But if you go down and in, and I go down and in, and we start to uncover the truth of liminal space and the cycling of transformation, and what has been true for you that has allowed you to love more, it's going to often be true for me that has allowed me to love more. And the more and more we see and enjoy God right here and now inside us, around us, then I don't know if you can see it, but it's kind of a red protrusion. It's like a red ball in the center. Can you see that? Yeah. Mm-hmm. And that.
Oh my gosh, the anticipation is killing me, Doug. Will you open it?
Oh, now I've got all the power. But look,
Allegra, you speak like a dog, like you're like talk, and I'm like, okay, Allegra, let's go.
I know, I'm like, can you open the ball?
But think of this way, like this is the body of Christ. All right, so the body of Christ is the center area, and we are all coming from the body of Christ. But our deepest self is one self, is Christ. And what is the body of Christ if it's not the body of God? This is what, if God had a shape, this is what God's shape would be. That it's a sphere that has no limitations. Uh-oh.
You're good.
Oh, okay. My camera, there we go. It was a sphere that has no limitations. And notice this too, that the colors are different. You see, and there's waves. So here's an interesting thing is that unity, which is unity, right? Unity is not uniformity, where everything is the same. Unity is diversity. So diversity, which is protected and maintained by love. So you and all of us, we are diverse and we're one. And thank God, because, you know, we want to have you, each one of us has a gift, and a perfect exact gift that only you can bring. Only you. And me too. And yet we're still one body. And that's as Christian as you get. I mean, that's as Orthodox Christian as you possibly get. That's St. Paul in the Bible. We are one body. On the other hand, it's a beautiful thing to really see it in this toy. And I always buy about 4 of them every year, and I give them away. Or they break, because they break kind of easy. But yeah, this is a good one. This is the whole theology right here of the universal Christ. In fact, I gave this to Richard Rohr, and he uses it from time to time, actually, to explore that. So, because it's a good symbol.
Hey, Doug, I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
So we talk a lot about love, right? Jesus is love, God is love, love's everywhere, right? And then, but you have this concept too of us having the obligation as Christians to be disciples,
Mm-hmm.
right? Bring people to Christ that don't know us. So it's like this balance, trying to find this balance of, you know, just showing everybody love, but then also at some point you have to tell, you know, people, well, the way you're going is wrong. And this is the way you need to go. This is the only way, and this is the only truth, you know? So that's why it's hard for me sometimes, taking this whole concept of just God and love and the universe, but then how do we save people's souls? Because there's more maybe unsaved than there are saved. Maybe, I don't know the statistics. But that's the balance that I try to always have, is this balance between love but truth.
Okay. Does that work for you?
I feel like, yeah, maybe not in some friendships recently. That's never happened to me before. But the stronger I've grown in my faith, a couple people I'm not friends with, that's never happened. But other people, yeah, I think so. Not that I've done anything wrong or bad, but my lifestyle has changed and things change. And people just keep going on their same, what I think is their same not good path. And I'm just on what I think is Jesus, following Jesus. Anyways, I think discipleship is extremely challenging. But sounds like you will maybe have a perspective of, no, Allegra, it's so simple, right?
Well, my perspective would be different from yours at the surface level, and pretty similar at the deeper level. At the surface, and so I'm hesitant to share what my particular perspective is, because I don't want to put my faith template on people and say, like, this is how you do it, because that's not what, I mean, as a counselor, that's not what I do, and certainly
Sure.
not as a presenter. So all I can do is invite people to say, well, is it leading you to see other people more in a more complex, non-judgmental love way? And I think that there are certain ways to understand theology that are true, but they're not the more comprehensive truth. So, for example, man, forgive me if I've said this here. Really, sometimes I repeat myself and I don't know where I've said things. But let's say you had a 3-year-old daughter, okay? And you have a park across the street from your house. And so, did I say this already? Oh, okay. So you have a 3-year-old daughter, you have a park across the street, and you say to her, "Ooh, let's go to the park." And she's, "Ooh, let's go." And so you open up the door, and she just, she bolts out, runs across the yard, runs across the street without looking, and gets to the park, and is like, "Mama, Mama, let's go." And you're like, "Oh, snap. Nope. This is going to be a life lesson. I'm going to bring her back. We're going to do this right because she needs to be protected from her lifestyle, if you will, of just running across the street without looking, because she could get herself really hurt." You see? So let's say then you grab her hand and you bring her back across the street, and then now you're standing facing the park, and the street is right in front of you. Can you all picture that in your mind? Okay. And you're holding her hand, and you look down on her, and you say to her, because she's 3, you say, "Never, ever, ever go across the street without holding my hand or Daddy's hand. Do you understand, Sophia? Or do you never, ever, ever, ever do this, because this is not right. You will hurt yourself, and you need to always wait for Mommy and Papi." All right. And then she's like, "Okay." And then you walk across the street, you stop and you model, and you walk across the street, and you get to the other side, and everything's cool. And then when you come back, she remembers she's waiting for your hand because you had said that, and then you guys stop and look together and then go. Now, she's 3 years old. You said never, ever, ever, and you were very stern about it. Did you actually mean never, ever, ever? No. You didn't actually mean never, ever, ever, because you, as the adult, have a concept of development and evolution of mind, of maturity, to know that she will be able, maybe in 3 years, to go across the street without any problems, because she will have learned that, to internalize that value for herself, and then make a decision to go across the street. All right? But did I lie? Because I said never, ever, ever, and I was real strong about it. But I know I didn't mean never, ever, ever. So that's a weird thing. And she understands me as never, ever, ever. But I have a larger picture. So that's what I mean is that what I told her was a truth. It was absolutely a truth. And inside of itself, there's logic, there's protection, there's love. But that truth belongs into a larger truth, which I already know, even as I told her never go, I already know that there will come a time not too long from now when I'm going to trust you to go by yourself. Okay? My experience with denominations, Christian denominations, because that's my background, is that there are Christian denominations usually formed by a pastor because of the pastor's experience or some school of thought that will align with the 3-year-old never, ever, ever. And they're going to tell you black and white exactly how to think. This is how you do it. This is how you don't do it. And maybe it was appropriate for a certain time, but to stay there your entire life is being stuck. You're always going to be 3-year-old. Then there are other denominations, and the way they talk is going to be a little bit more above that in terms of understanding stuff. And there's these hierarchy of truths that are transcend, that include the one that you just so it's include and transcend. Include the truth and transcend. Include the truth and transcend. So having said that, I think that Christianity has tried the whole let's convert people into denominations. Let's make disciples out of people and convert them and show them they're wrong and show them who Jesus is. I think we've done that, and it's not worked.
It doesn't work. Yeah.
It doesn't work, and it's a manipulative, fear-based, judgmental thing, the exact thing that Jesus said not to do. So it doesn't work. And then you talk to somebody like a pastor is like, well, no, you do, because here's this Bible verse and here's this Bible verse. And then they'll say, and I love you, and that's why I want to see you in heaven forever. And that's why I'm going to be really strong. Okay, that's a truth inside many other truths that they're not seeing. So the way I understand the whole thing about Christianity and about discipleship and all of that is my vision of Christianity is so broad that it says this. When Jesus said, I am the way, the truth, and the life, or when Jesus said, no one comes to the Father except through me, what I think Jesus was saying is no one comes to the new room except through the cross of your life. No one comes to more expanded vision of themselves, of their world, of life, of God, except through dying to yourself, dying to your previous way of understanding life, so that you can have a broader vision. So I think Jesus is the human symbol of the dying principle. And then God is the symbol of the rising principle. And the Holy Spirit is the symbol of the evolution that keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger. See? So, therefore, to make disciples of all of the nations is to affirm the one path. And the one path is dying and rising. Dying and rising. And I have known more agnostics, more atheists, more Buddhists, more Hindus. I have known more Wiccans, whatever you want to call it, who are way more Christian than Christians.
Yeah.
And so, because when you look at their life, whatever their belief system is, has brought them to living liminal space with a sense of wholeness and integrity, where they can trust the benevolence of a larger transcendent reality, even as they're suffering in the middle of it. And that right there, what I just said, is the Christian message. That's the gospel all wrapped up with a bow. So discipleship is to affirm people's paths when they are letting go of things that create for them distractions, pain. Like, for example, here's an example. On a super fundamentalist Christian level, I might say to a client who's a kid, let's say the kid is, 17, who's smoking pot every single day. Now, I don't know any fundamentalist Christian who thinks pot isn't a sin. I don't. I'm not saying I think that, but I think many, many Christians like pot, absolutely a sin, or drinking, absolutely a sin. Total going to hell sin kind of thing. Then I could say that to them, and it's like, I'm going to scold you, and just like your parents, and we're going to stop you from doing this. Does that ever really lead to transformation? I've never experienced it leading to transformation for people. But what if I were to say to that 17-year-old, trusting their own experience? Remember last week, I believe it was last week, we talked about the tricycle and the big wheel of experience. And then you have the two back wheels are going to be things like scripture or tradition or, whatever kind of works for your understanding of theology. But the big wheel in front is experience. So what if I trust experience in this 17-year-old? Because why? Because she's a human being. And I know what it's like to be a human being because I happen to be one too. And I'm trying to be really present in this human process where I know how much I get pulled into a gravity of thoughts or worldview or something that brings me into anxiety or deep depression or a lack of perspective. I know what that feels like because I'm constantly feeling that. If I'm not, that's the constant noises in my head, and then I detach from that and come back in the center. So let's say I say to that 17-year-old with compassion, I'll say, man, you are really, I can see that you're suffering from anxiety every day for you to choose to do this. And she's like, oh my God, yeah, that's exactly right. Tell me about the anxiety. So then we start to talk about the anxiety. You know, all of a sudden it's not, I'm looking at the pot use as a self-medication as opposed to a sin. And then I say, well, let me ask you a question. If you were to measure up all of the cons, like pros and cons, if you were to measure up all the cons to pot smoking for you, and then all the pros to the pot smoking for you, let's be honest, like what weighs more? Like if you were to weigh them, you know? And almost every single time somebody would say, when I ask them that question with no judgment, I'm not even asking them to change their behavior. I'm just getting them to see, to feel. And they would say, honestly, at first I feel more relaxed, but then I don't like how I'm always numbing out. I don't like how I feel paranoid a lot of times. And I'll ask them, well, like, how are your grades? Oh yeah, they suck since I started smoking. And how does it feel when you have really bad grades? I mean, how does that help your anxiety? Oh, it doesn't. It's horrible. So what I'm hearing you say then is that even though you're using pot maybe to help you with anxiety, it actually creates more anxiety. Yeah, I never thought about that. Well, what do you want to do about that? You see, so what I've just done is I've given them the gospel. That is the gospel. That is choosing life, choosing wholeness, and I never once said Jesus. And if they can learn to die, entre comillas, like die on the cross of wanting to break that habit and then weathering the not smoking pot because they are choosing what they're for versus, oh, it's a sin, I should stop. I'm for the freedom of not smoking. I'm for the freedom of not feeling that much anxiety. When they can choose that, that is a disciple of Christ. That is a disciple of the path, the one way, because it's brought them into a greater sense of wholeness and awareness. And I haven't even ever said God, because a lot of them aren't. They've rejected their religion of their family of origin. Why? They probably should have, because it was very shame-based.
Yeah, and judgy, yeah.
Why wouldn't
that happens to me when I decided to maybe see a bigger picture and I stop feeling guilty not being in certain denomination. Allowed like God's love being every denomination, every human being. It was hard at the beginning because you're so attached to this church or this building or this type of music, and you're like, I'm living something, and then you go to liminal space thinking, but it's beautiful that now I don't feel this like box in my face.
Yeah. You know, Allegra, I'm just going to share, this kind of helps me at least, like, to have this mindset with a lot of my loved ones who are kind of stuck in that pattern of destruction, if you will, is that like God is outside of time and space, right? We know that. And like he has his own timeline for people, right? And so where they are presently is not an indication of who they are as a whole person or what their journey is. And so sometimes I tend to see them, their behaviors or their actions that I disagree with, or their own self-destructive things in the present moment, and that's their life, that they're destroying their life. But God has such a bigger picture, and it allows me to enter into empathy and almost like appreciative of the journey that they're on, right? Because we all are on one, and I can really kind of center into that loving space to just do what I can to see Christ in them presently, because it's like we learned in our book, Christ is everywhere, even in dark places. So and maybe connect with them on that level, and understanding this is a bigger picture, that maybe today this is where they are, but doesn't mean that in 5 months, 5 years, 50 years, they're going to be in the same place.
And listen, I'm not saying we don't set boundaries sometimes. No. You can't say to a kid who's being abused by their parents that this is okay. And go ahead, parents, I want to just honor where you're at on your journey. You go ahead and beat your kid. No, I'm not, or wife, or whatever it is. I'm not saying that. So it requires discernment. But if our theology is based upon, I've got to get people on the Jesus team, and they have to go through this particular formula of accepting Jesus, Lord and Master, and I have to critique their behavior because it's not conforming to what I think the Bible is saying. But remember, whatever you think the Bible is saying is your interpretation. Like we could take different verses of the Bible, especially like homosexuality and stuff like that, and we could critique them to where you would see them in a completely different way. But you and I have, we are interpreting the Bible based on where we are at and based on our culture's interpretation of it. But we're talking about a culture that was written in a different language and a different part of the world, different skin color. Jesus wasn't white, and different religion and time. 2,000 years ago. I'm not saying there's not timeless truths there, but how do we understand them? Because the more broadly you start to see things, the less concrete they are and the more true they are at the same time. So, for example, a Buddhist could be a great Christian and never, ever say the word Jesus. If they've learned how to detach and go into their anchored self and see the world from the eyes of compassion, I mean, how is that not Christ? Being Christ to other people, So I just offer that because I that might be where, your pastor would certainly push against that, and most pastors would. What I just said.
Allegra, we ever had a lot of like a challenge with bad things, and then we have a friend that he's a priest, and then he said, what happened with someone that is amazingly beautiful person in his family, but maybe it's a Buddhist or maybe a Muslim, and this father Rudy looked at him and said, they're already Christians, but they don't know. And this is someone that gives more respect, theology guy, Catholic, blah, blah, but he looked at him and said, don't worry about that. If the heart is transformed, it's not your job to judge and to change things.
Yeah, because I think that there's a way the priest was understanding that all the world, the world itself is going through the dying and rising process. And I think the word Christianity means the follower of Christ, right? And if we notice Jesus never one time said, worship me. I'm not saying don't worship Jesus. I'm just saying notice that Jesus never one time said, worship me.
He just says, follow me.
Follow me. So a Christian is someone who follows the path of dying and rising. That's it. A Christian is someone who operates from the anchored self, and you're around them, whether their superficial title is Buddhist or atheist or agnostic or whatever it is, their deeper self, if you're around a Christian, as when they are operating from this great mystery of dying and rising, and they can love life as it is, even if they need to set boundaries, but there's always a sense of connectedness and joy in the present moment.
So Doug, do you believe that certain people will go to hell?
I don't believe that there is a eternal hell. I don't.
No.
What I believe is that, based on a lot of different reasons, first off, our concept of hell is very much...
Or not to heaven, let's put it that way.
Well, again, I don't believe... Our concept of heaven and hell is very much about our interpretation in the Western Hemisphere at a certain time, and it wasn't what the original Christians understood as heaven and hell. For example, have you ever heard of the fires of Gehenna? You know,
Like in the book of Revelation.
you're going to get cast out into the fires where the fire never quenches.
Mm-hmm.
Would you understand that as hell? I mean, we would, right? Like we would hear that and we would understand that as hell, right?
Yeah, the detailed descriptions in Revelations and some of the just crazy, beastly, weird things.
Right. Well,
I
how
would
about
not
this?
interpret that.
There really
Go ahead.
is a fire of Gehenna, because Gehenna is an area outside of the immediate city of Jerusalem. It used to be outside of the temple wall, and that is where they burn trash, and it's eternal because that's the trash heap. And so, what happens whenever you are in liminal space? You are burning. Is liminal space a kind of burning? Yes. Liminal space is a burning of your old self into the new self, is it not? You know, and like if you did something to experience a lot of shame, doesn't shame feel like burn? Well, what is happening if we're able to live in liminal space well, our old way of seeing and doing things and living is being burnt up in the fires of Gehenna, in the sense of that's trash. That's the chaff that's being burnt off to reveal the wheat or the gold being refined in the fire. And so I think when we die, I mean, I do believe in an eternal existence, absolutely. I think that in our human existence here, I think is one phase of embodiment. But I think that when we die, we will continue to be in some kind of realm or some kind of something where we will constantly be given opportunity to grow more and more in our scope of understanding love. And I don't know what that looks like, but it's a constant movement forward of understanding more and more love. And I think whatever consciousness that you have, that I have, when we die, will be the level of consciousness that we will begin the afterlife with. And so here's an example. Like if you really want to study up on this, and I got to go, I have a client at 12, but if you want to study up on this, I recommend studying near-death experiences. I mean, there's a lot of psychiatrists and like a whole lot of people are studying near-death experiences, because despite religion, ethnicity, culture, gender, all of that stuff, from all over the world, people are having very similar experiences. And they're coming back to report on them. And it's uncanny how connected a lot of people's stuff is. But what we found is that people who die at a level of, like, I'm saying generalities, at a level of high love and seeing here, when you die, that's what you're going to experience. That's like you're going to grad school, okay? And then you start grad school and whatever that is. But if my Christianity is fundamentalist and rigid and shaming, even though I did it in the name of Jesus or whatever, then when I die, I'm going to be at that frequency of consciousness that's going to attract other people, like birds of a feather flock together. So I'm going to attract other people, and together we're going to create a world that is going to feel right. There's going to be a white picket church fence with a mean pastor, and until people start to wake up and say, this can't be it. And so it's a slow process, and who knows, I mean, it's of all of eternity to do it. And what we believe as Christians is that the fullness of the one infinite creator emerged in time in a human body. Like that's the fullness of it. But you know, there's an infinite amount of time to get there, and you'll never get there. So the journey is actually the point. You know. Anyway, that's a lot of food for thought. I mean, we could go on for a long time, but I want to say to all of you, I just so much enjoyed this time, and I just thank you for trusting our process here and inviting me in. Karen, thank you so much.